Is it just me, or do you also feel like we've forgotten how to write villains who are truly, terrifyingly, genuinely evil? Instead, we get brooding bad boys with tragic backstories who are secretly soft on the inside, or over exaggerated gods bent on world domination, without any real substance or intelligence behind their actions. But truly evil villains, the ones who make your skin crawl or your blood boil because you genuinely don't know how the hero will overcome them, they're not just doing evil things, they're doing what they genuinely believe is right, and that's what makes them so scary. So, in the spooky spirit of Halloween, I thought I'd make a video on the 8 biggest mistakes I've seen writers make when writing fantasy villains and how to fix them. Because we all want our antagonists to be the kind of character readers love to hate, and also because a weak villain makes for a weak story. Your hero is only as compelling as the villain they're up against. If you're new here, my name is Brianna and I post videos every Sunday that help you become a better writer. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel. The first mistake is not making them a fully realized character. This is the big one that encompasses so many villain writing mistakes, and is treating your villain like a plot device instead of an actual character. So often, writers spend months developing their protagonist. They're crafting detailed backstories, mapping out their character arcs, exploring their fears and desires, figuring out their favorite foods and childhood traumas. Then they get to the villain and think, okay, this person opposes the hero and wants to destroy the world. Done. It was super cloudy outside, and now it's super sunny outside, so bear with me on this dynamic lighting. Your villain needs to be just as fully developed as your protagonist. They need goals beyond just stop the hero. They should have relationships, vulnerabilities, things they care about, things they fear, and yes, they need their own character arc. So let's look at a weak example, and then I'm going to suggest some ways to make it stronger. Now, these examples and the rest of the examples I'm going to mention throughout this video are just examples that I quickly put together for the sake of this video. So these examples aren't going to be perfect examples. I'm just a writer trying to make a video. Anyways, the weak example. There's a crown that gives its wearer ultimate godlike powers, but it also corrupts their soul. The hero must destroy this artifact before it gets into the wrong hands. It's all very Lord of the Rings-esque. Your villain, the High Priestess Morvana, exists solely to oppose your hero's quest to destroy the crown. She appears in scenes when the plot requires an obstacle. She fights the hero when it's necessary, but when she's not actively blocking the protagonist's path, she just disappears. We don't know what she wants beyond stopping the hero, or what she's doing outside of this conflict. So for the most part, we only know one concrete reason why she's the villain, which is that she wants the crown. But we don't understand the context surrounding it. You don't get that real threat of her presence in the background even though she's off page. So then there's no real reason to fear her because there's no feeling or understanding that she's making dangerous moves behind the scenes. In that sense, she's not a person, she's just a roadblock. So let's try to strengthen that example. Morvana isn't just trying to stop the hero from getting the crown, she's trying to obtain it herself because she believes it's the key to resurrecting her order's dead goddess. But she's also struggling with the crisis of faith after finding out that this deity might never have actually existed. After decades of devotion, she realizes her entire religious order has been built on lies. So she wants to prove that everything she sacrificed, her innocence, her family, her soul, whatever it may be, wasn't for nothing. And she's willing to achieve this goal at any cost, no matter who gets hurt, even Lila, if it comes to that. Lila is her protege, a young priestess who looks up to Morvana with absolute faith. Morvana refuses to destroy Lila's belief system the same way hers was, so she throws herself into the quest for the crown with the intent to use it to become the goddess reincarnated and restore the oppressive power and influence on the world that her order once had. One of her strategies is to have Lila infiltrate the heroes group and befriend them. You as the reader know she's the enemy, but they don't. So every time the hero reveals a secret to Lila or they go on a mission together to do something critical to the plot, we get that sense of dread because we feel Morvana's influence and threat lingering without her actually being there. Now the villain has real motivations, real stakes, and real fears behind her actions. This is great, especially if you don't want to write scenes in your villain's perspective. If you do, however, want to deepen their character arc, incorporating scenes in their point of view is, well, one of the best ways to do it. For example, you can give Morvana scenes where she's not fighting the hero. She's conducting rituals with her fellow priestesses. She has a crisis of conscience when he realizes that her quest is going to require innocent bloodshed, but ultimately decides that the means justifies the end. She's mentoring Lila and grappling with guilt about the path she's leading her down. It never hurts to give your villain moments of doubt, exhaustion, or determination that have nothing to do with the protagonist, because they're also living their own life. It's just that no matter what internal obstacle they face, they choose the evil path. So now when the hero finally confronts the villain in the climax, we understand that we're not just watching good versus evil. We're watching two fully realized people with competing needs colliding in a way that's tragic for the both of them. I will note though that this depends on who or what exactly your villain is. If your villain is the embodiment of true evil that doesn't have an actual physical form in your world, then you'll need to approach their development differently than you would a human character like Morvana. The point is that your villain is a protagonist of their own story. If you're not developing them with the same depth and complexity that you give your protagonist, you're cheating your readers and weakening your story. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this video, it's that. Do a full character worksheet for your villain. Start by outlining what they want, what they need, and what they're afraid of. Then their strengths and weaknesses. Then, depending on your story, give them people they care about. Give them hobbies, a morning routine. Make them feel real. And if they aren't actually physically in your world, make their presence feel real. Like in The Lord of the Rings, Sauron's presence is always felt even though he never leaves his tower. His influence permeates the entire story. Of course, that's easier said than done, and even though I've been writing for many years now, this kind of complex character development is still one of my greatest struggles. So I wanted to share with you how I brainstorm, outline, and keep track of all these multifaceted characters, and that's with the writing program called Loreforge. Loreforge kindly let me try out their platform for a month, and it's quickly become my new go-to tool for organizing my stories, world building, and managing my characters. Right now, I'm writing an epic science fantasy novel, and the antagonist is a prominent character in the story. He doesn't get his own point of view scenes, but I'm writing in the perspectives of 4 other characters and how they see and interact with them. So you can imagine how hard it is to remember what's happening, with who, and when, and where, and what the antagonist is doing in the background. So the character and world tracking tools have really helped me keep track of all my story details, cross-reference characters, plot points, and settings, so nothing gets lost in the creative process. As writers, you already know how hard it is to put together a coherent story from the whirlwind of ideas rampaging inside your head. But Loreforge offers tons of great tools for authors, RPG creators, storytellers, basically anyone who needs help with managing complex narratives and building whole new worlds. So if you'd like to check it out for yourself, you can try Loreforge Pro for free for 30 days by using my link in the description below. The second mistake is that they're evil just because they're evil. You know the type. The dark overlord who sits in his obsidian tower, plotting world domination because he's a bad guy. And that's what bad guys do, right? This is lazy writing, and readers can spot it from a mile away. Villains who are evil without motivation are flat, boring, forgettable, and it usually happens because the writer is focusing too much on the hero's motivations and development while forgetting that the villain has the same things too. In real life, most people don't just wake up one day and decide to become monsters. There's always a reason, a catalyst, or a moment that pushed them down that path. Imagine you have a villain named Malachar. He's the ruler of the Shadow Realm, and his goal is to plunge the world into an eternal darkness filled with chaos and destruction. Why? Because he's evil. That's it. That's his entire motivation. The problem is that there's nothing there to make him interesting. There's no depth, no complexity, no reason for readers to care about his side of the story, because he's just the bad guy, and bad guys shouldn't have complex reasons for their actions. He becomes a typical surface-level, cartoonish villain slotted into a layered and complicated world. But what if Malachar once served as a high priest in the Temple of Light? He dedicated his entire life to the sun goddess, believing that light was the only path to salvation. But when a plague swept through his village, unaliving everyone he loved, including his daughter, he prayed endlessly for divine intervention. The goddess remained silent. In his grief and rage, Malachar concluded that the light had abandoned him, and that it was nothing but empty promises and false hope. So he turned to darkness, not out of a desire for power, but because he genuinely believes that light is a lie that gives people false comfort. He wants to plunge the world into darkness so that humanity can finally see the truth, that there's no divine salvation, only the cold reality of existence. In his mind, he's liberating people from delusion. Now he becomes a villain with depth. He's not evil for evil's sake, he's doing what he believes is morally right based on his traumatic experience. And that's infinitely more terrifying than a generic, I want to rule the world motivation. Give your villain a reason for their actions that makes sense to them, even if it's horrifying to everyone else. Every villain is the hero of their own story. Mistake number 3 is making them too sympathetic. Now I know what you're thinking, wait Brianna, didn't you just tell us to give our villains depth and motivation? Yes, I did. But there's a fine line between creating a complex villain and making them so sympathetic that they stop being villains altogether. Making your villains too sympathetic is something that I'm seeing a lot in fantasy right now. It's a hot trend to see morally gray characters and anti-heroes in upcoming books, and that's fine. I love a good morally gray character myself. But I think that we're losing sight a little about what makes a villain truly evil. And lately, what I'm seeing in contemporary novels is that the character who the author intended to be the big bad villain isn't really a villain. I'm all for giving them tragic backstories, moments of kindness, or redeeming qualities, but if you want them to be the big bad villain in your story, then there's a line you don't want to cross. And the best way I can describe that line is that you want your readers to have mixed or complicated feelings or opinions about them, but you don't want them to start rooting for them instead of against them. A villain should almost always be the enemy. So here's what a weak example of that might look like. Your hero has been tasked with defeating the main villain, the Queen Seraphine, who has been conquering neighboring kingdoms and enslaving their people to do laborious work. But she's only doing it because her own kingdom is starving and she needs resources to feed her people. She still makes sure that all the families of these conquered kingdoms are taken care of. She feels immense guilt over her actions, but it's actually the only way to ensure the safety of her people and, in fact, the people of those other kingdoms, because only she knows that a lethal, magical winter storm is coming, a storm that the other rulers dismissed as superstition. So Seraphine is just doing what she has to do to ensure everyone's survival. She's way too relatable. She's not really a villain at this point, she's just a protagonist with questionable methods, and now I want to read her story, not the hero's. In fact, it feels like the hero has turned into the villain. There's no moral line she's willing to cross that horrifies us, because everything she does is justified by her sympathetic circumstances. So a stronger example might be, to keep the setup, Queen Seraphine is conquering kingdoms for resources. But the twist is that her kingdom isn't actually starving. The upper class is hoarding wealth and food while telling the common people that there's a shortage. Seraphine knows this, but instead of redistributing resources within her own kingdom and challenging the corrupt nobility, she finds it easier to invade the other lands and enslave their populations. Why? Because only she knows about the deadly storm that's coming. None of the other rulers know this, and she won't tell them because she doesn't want to compete for resources. She's using these enslaved people, even kids, to create a stockpile of resources for her kingdom to survive the storm, and then she's planning to leave them stranded outside the gates to fend for themselves. She tells herself it's for the greater good, that she's securing her kingdom's future, but deep down she knows she's taking the coward's way out. She could fix the problem through internal reform and working with the other kingdoms to ensure everyone's survival through this storm, but that means trusting the kind of people who had wronged her in the past. She's not willing to be vulnerable like that again. So she chooses the evil path, not because she has to, but because it's easier for her. In this example, she still has complexity and motivation, but she's making choices that are morally reprehensible. She's crossing lines that make readers uncomfortable, and that's what makes her a true villain. Again, sympathetic elements are fine, but they shouldn't excuse the villain's evil actions. If readers understand why the villain became who they are or why they're doing what they're doing, but they still don't want to see them succeed, then you struck the perfect balance. So those are the first 3 big mistakes I've seen writers and authors make when writing their fantasy villains and how to fix them. In the interest of time, because I don't want to make this video too long, I'm going to pause here. Next Sunday, I'll talk about the other mistakes I've seen, some of which you might not have thought about yourself. So if you don't want to miss that one, be sure to subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, you might want to watch this one next. And if you're interested in checking out Loreforge, don't forget to use my discount code to try free for 30 days. Until the next chapter.